Yeah. Yesterday for breakfast, I had 2 delicious fried eggs cooked in coconut oil, free.
Free.
Yeah, free.
I mean,
Other
you
than all
paid
the other things.
something for
Yeah,
it.
I mean,
So, that's fine. Whatever.
During the summer, I pay very little for most of my animals. They eat grass, and the chickens just go, and then they come back.
There you go.
Well, that concludes another episode of Homesteading Without Hating It. And so I want to thank our guests, Brenton and Beth, for just laying down what it means to homestead. To everyone else who thought you were listening to a ministry podcast, I apologize. And
our side podcast.
I'm just kidding. I think I'm
Maybe
more
that's
jealous.
part of the secret of doing ministry without hating it.
It might be, but you're getting ahead of the interview. We're not even into the serious questions yet.
All right, I'll simmer down.
Welcome back to the Ministry Without Hating It podcast, a ministry of Odyssey Haven coaching and counseling dedicated to the pursuit of answering the question, is it possible to do ministry without hating it? We have a theory that it just might be. Brenton.
Yes.
Welcome.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
There's always that moment.
Yes.
Right after where you just go, what's he going to say next?
Yep.
And I take a breath.
Saucy.
And then I exhale. And then I remember, I can do this.
Yep.
I can do this. We've recorded others. I can do this.
Yep.
How are we doing today?
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Enjoying life in rainy, muddy Indiana.
Yeah. You're about to enter into the mud season.
Oh man,
there.
I farm it.
Yeah. Well, funny that you should say that because this is the first episode segue. That's right. That's how you do it as a pro, that you get to actually nerd out about homesteading with a guest.
Yep, I do. we spend all of about a minute and 34 seconds talking about chickens.
I think it was much longer than that. Right. And that's okay. Today, our episode, we get to sit down. We had a great conversation with our new friend for some, Beth Hackbarth. She is a pastor. She has served in all kinds of roles. She currently serves as the associate supervisor for the Central District of Foursquare Churches, which is no small thing. And so we are so grateful for her time. She really unpacks a lot of things, but specifically just, formation of other leaders, but also in discipleship, and just really, really, really great conversation. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever disagreed with you, Chad.
Yeah.
Well, maybe not in this intro part, at least.
Not that's been recorded. How about that?
Yeah.
Not that's been recorded. I do want to make a small observation, though, Brenton. We don't bring this up in the conversation that we had with Beth.
Sure.
But one of the words that she uses, this is a little bit of a spoiler alert. So if you want to skip past this, you can, but we need to have this conversation real briefly.
Gotcha.
Is that she feels like one of the words that describes her, she unpacks this very, very well, is that of the word trailblazer.
Uh-huh.
And I have to just give you props, because not once as a Portland Trailblazers fan did you yell Portland, did you yell Go Blazers, did you do anything that alluded to the fact that you are a Trailblazer yourself?
Yep, I am practicing the fruit of the spirits, specifically self-control.
Oh, yes.
Yep.
Hold for applause. Yes. Very good.
That's my reward.
Yes. So, and listen, this is no small thing. This goes deep. I was just sharing this with AJ. One of the very first Pacer games when we lived in Indiana that we got to go to together with our family and Brenton's family was actually against the Trailblazers. And I was actually a Pacers fan growing up. I loved Reggie Miller. And so when we moved back to Indiana, that just kind of all made sense. And so we got to go to this game, and I knew it was something when our kids are little, okay? Like our oldest, I believe, maybe, kindergarten, I don't know. They walk in, and Lucy, your daughter, is wearing a Portland Trailblazers cheerleading outfit.
Yep, head to toe.
So this goes deep.
Yep.
The fact that he was able to hold that in.
Yeah, I'm telling you, the Lord's doing a work in my life. I'm moving from being a fan to, yeah.
To the acceptance.
To acceptance, yeah, that's
the,
it.
The acceptance portions of
that's
grieving.
it.
Okay,
yeah,
that's fine. That's fine.
I am now fully in Indiana, so
good for you. Good for you.
Yeah.
Well, all right. If you've made it this far with us, congratulations. Thank you. And if you haven't skipped ahead, we want to say we hope you enjoy just as much as we did our conversation with our friend, Pastor Beth Hackbarth. Well, it is our privilege, and we're really excited to welcome Pastor Beth Hackbarth to the podcast. Beth, welcome.
Hey, good to see you guys.
Good to have you on. Okay, we were talking about this a little bit before we jumped on, and we like to start off by asking questions that don't have anything to do with ministry, but almost always still wind up talking about it. And you mentioned some of these are some soul-searching questions, even though they're kind of nonsense, right? And so we'll start with the deepest soul-searching question that there is, and that is just describe yourself to us in 3 words.
Okay, so 3 words. There's a lot of things I could say, but the first word I would say is trailblazer. And my calling statement has that word in it, so I feel like I have to describe myself using that. There's just kind of like this at my core, the heart of a pioneer, that everything I'm doing, I'm always like taking somebody somewhere. Or taking a group somewhere. So there's definitely like this heart of a trailblazer inside of me. It comes from when I was growing up, I did hiking and backpacking in Jackson Hole. And so there's something about like the picture of a trail, taking people on a journey, being at the front, all of that stuff. Like, so the word has a ton of meaning for me. A second word would be tenacity.
Oh, okay.
So there's I was thinking about it. I recently just took the StrengthsFinder test again and met with a StrengthsFinder coach. And so over the years, I've taken it a few different times and had some different results. But this last time, 3 of my strengths were activator, focus, achiever, and then learner and input. And the coach that I met with, she said, usually if you have an organizational team, managing a project or something, and you're trying to get something done, you want somebody that has an achiever, you want somebody that has an activator, you want somebody that has focus, because it's the start, stay, and finish components of a project. And so she said, she was like, you have all 3 in your StrengthsFinder. So she's like, that could be really good or really bad. Like a dog on a bone. And so I've had to steward that well in my life. But there is something about me that I'm like, once I'm on something, good luck getting me off target. So tenacity.
Tenacious. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the last one doesn't sound like the first 2, but it's tender-hearted. Okay. And it has, I think, been a blessing, but also difficult. So I deeply, deeply love people. And so it sort of feels like this perpetual tension in my wiring. But I think it's like the Lord put it there to balance me out with that trailblazer, tenaciousness, and I really, really love people. So over the years, I've just had to make sure that I, keep thick skin but soft heart. As I'm out in front, bushwhacking with my machete, making things happen, all of that stuff, making sure I'm bringing people with me and keeping my own heart tender. And I was talking to a friend when I started this role about 4 years ago, and we kind of made this commitment together. She's in a similar role as me, is that at the end of all of this, we want to love Jesus more and love people more. And if anything about this is causing those things to diminish, then there's something wrong. So I think it's just a good counterbalance to the first 2. So.
Yeah, I'm glad you answered that, I'm glad you said that, because one of my next follow-up questions was going to be, how does those all interplay? Because you're right there. I could see one of the first 2 either supporting or reinforcing the other in a lot of ways. But then you add the tender-hearted, and especially, by the way, your role. Tell us your role.
Yeah, I serve in this season as associate supervisor for the Central District.
So essentially, you're helping pastors. For those that, and there's a lot of other, that's a way oversimplification of what Beth does. But just I only bring this up.
Accurate. Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of other things that go with that, and we know, but at the same time, go.
It's like your congregation saying, "Wait, you only work on Sundays, right?"
Right.
Yeah.
Or
that's all you do.
You just write sermons. Yeah, that's the fun.
That's it.
But I bring that up because the tenderhearted, as you're working with people, as you're helping, even clear the way for future generations, those that are walking beside you right now, you got to have that tender heart with that. And so, sounds like you were wired perfectly for the role that you're in now.
Some days I would say yes, and some days I question it when I'm crying because I'm tenderhearted because of the trailblazing.
Sure.
Sometimes it feels like a blessing, sometimes it feels like a curse. But
that sounds like ministry. Like when
for sure.
That's why we started this podcast. How do we not cry all the time? So
right.
I thought that was you were supposed to.
That's the
let me know if you figure that out.
That depends on what guest it is. Yeah. Like you're allowed to cry. Don't cry so much.
Right.
Sounds like Beth is on the. You're allowed to cry.
Crying in baseball.
Oh, nope, just kidding.
Yep.
All right, there's no crying. All right, what are your top 3 items on your bucket list?
Okay, so I made a bucket list a couple years ago. I went through like a calling discernment process, and we had to actually make bucket lists for like these different categories of our lives.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I went back and looked at it, and a lot of the stuff has actually been fulfilled in the last few years, which is really cool.
Okay.
On a side note, I think there's something about just saying something or writing it down that helps you to move in that direction, almost without even thinking about it. So I think there's a real value in that.
Yeah.
But some things that are still on it. So my husband goes to Thailand every year. That's been a big focus of our church, ministering in Thailand. I've gone twice. I went the very first trip in 2012 and then went just this last August. And we've always said that we would love to add to one of those trips to go down to Phuket, Thailand. And I don't know if you've seen it, but it's like this. It looks like it's from a movie. It really is from a movie, but like aqua blue waters and like these big green mountains jutting out of the ocean.
Oh, okay.
It looks like something from like a pirate movie.
Or Avatar.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I mean, Pirates is fine too. That's fine.
Sure. Yeah, but it's real. It's not made up.
Oh, okay. Got it.
So that's the difference.
Big difference. Yeah. Yep.
So anyway, we've always said it would be cool to add on to one of the trips. We're going there anyway, like a few days down in like one of these like incredibly exotic tropical places. We haven't done that yet, but I would really like to.
Okay.
A second one, this is something I've wanted since I was in college, is I want to learn Krav Maga. So like Israeli self-defense.
Oh, okay. I was like, wait, did she just stutter? What happened? Okay.
No. Yeah. So like I don't know if you've heard of it.
Like, wait.
No. Krav Maga.
Okay. Uh-huh.
It's it's like it's an Israeli self-defense class. And
wow.
I had a student when I taught high school English back in the day, and she was a triple degree black belt as a high school student. And so she was like, yeah, like I literally could be like in a dark alley anywhere and protect myself. And like to have that level of confidence that I could take anybody down. Yeah, no fear. So I do not have that.
Okay.
So that's why I need to learn Krav Maga.
So how do you, are there like dojos around you for that kind of thing or what?
No.
How do you, okay, that's the problem.
Yeah, exactly.
I got it. Okay.
There's not in Sterling, Colorado.
Got it.
So.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You put out a want ad on Reddit or something. Where's the
the first step is to learn how to spell it, and then you can enter that into the search engine and see what happens from there.
So I do have that done. Check.
Okay.
And the second part, I haven't learned it yet. So
okay.
And then my third is, since I graduated with my bachelor's degree back in the day, I wanted to get my master's degree, and the Lord at that time was like, it's not time to do that yet. I will in May be graduating with my master's degree.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. So it's a big bucket list item that I've had, and I'm almost at the finish line for it.
Awesome. That's awesome.
Fantastic.
This next question, and I probably should have even asked if you even have pets, but do you have pets?
Yes.
Okay, great. Then we shall proceed. I was just like, I don't want to be that, Side note, like, we once asked Nina Sims what was her favorite cereal, breakfast cereal, and she goes, I don't eat cereal. I was like, all right, that question's done.
That's an answer in itself,
So if your pets could talk, then what would they say?
Well, I have to preface it by saying we have quite a few animals, which isn't like the life that I thought I would be living. But my kids do 4-H. And so we've got chickens, we've got ducks, like mini call ducks. We have cattle. It's my husband's side hustle. So we have cows.
Wow.
And what else do we have? All kinds of miscellaneous stuff. And we have a dog. So when you ask that question, it's my dog who's actually our pet. And if the question is if he could say something.
Yeah. What if they could talk?
He would say, I love you the most.
Yeah.
I'm his favorite.
That's awesome.
Don't tell my kids, but
they definitely have their people. And the dog that we have, I am definitely her person.
Yeah. I mean,
she loves everybody, but she loves me most.
Totally. I mean, I know that. My dog knows that. My family doesn't know that. They think that they're his favorite, but no. So
I have a question. When you all have to go travel, how hard is it to find somebody to watch the cattle, the chickens, the goats, asking for a friend?
Well.
Totally. That used to be the issue. But a couple years ago, Ben, my husband's parents moved to Sterling, which was like actually a desire that we've had for 20 years. So when we do have to travel, his mom and dad step in and help us, which is
that's
incredible.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So I got to get my parents to move to Indiana.
All right. You wanting to get some livestock, Brenton?
We have goats, chickens, bunnies, all the things.
So you're in the same boat.
Yeah. We would probably have cattle as well, but I don't have a fence around our yard, so our pasture.
So what's the solution for you right now? What do? You don't ever leave?
I hire college kids and it costs me way too much.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, if I could screenshot AJ and I's face versus the two of you, getting nerdy about homesteading, we could almost do its own separate podcast just on that meme alone.
Right now, with the cost of eggs, we're winning.
Oh, totally.
Yeah,
people are jealous. People are jealous.
Hold on a second. I don't need you flashing your eggness in my face right now. Okay.
Yeah. Yesterday for breakfast, I had 2 delicious fried eggs cooked in coconut oil, free.
Yeah, free.
I mean, you paid something for it.
I mean,
So, that's fine. Whatever.
During the summer, I pay very little for most of my animals. They eat grass, and the chickens just go, and then they come back.
There you go.
Well, that concludes another episode of Homesteading Without Hating It. And so I want to thank our guests, Brenton and Beth, for just laying down what it means to homestead. To everyone else who thought you were listening to a ministry podcast, I apologize. And
our side podcast.
I'm just kidding. I think I'm
Maybe
more
that's
jealous.
Part of the secret of doing ministry without
it might it. It might be, but you're getting ahead of the interview. We're not even into the serious questions yet.
All right, I'll simmer down.
All right, I'm gonna jump ahead just a little bit because I think this other one can tie into some other things. What are you finding exciting right now, or what do you find yourself looking forward to? You mentioned a few things that you're moving towards, but what's inspiring you these days?
Yeah, so our kids are 15, 13, 11. I really just love this season. I was a stay-at-home mom until all of my kids were in kindergarten. That was a commitment that I had made. But that was a long haul, 3 kiddos, 2 years apart each. So they're just at an age now where they like being with us, but they're super independent. So, I mean, doing family trips is fun. We're gearing up for an adventure this summer to Jackson Hole, where I grew up. We're going to go whitewater rafting. Like that's stuff that when they were little, they couldn't do, right? You couldn't strap them in a boat and take them down a river. So it's just really fun.
But
I mean, yeah. But we might not have all of them at the end of it.
But it's frowned upon. So
yeah.
When air quotes.
Air quotes, yes.
When they're little, the entire goal in life is like, I survived a day and all my kids are alive.
Yes.
You know?
Yep.
Yes.
I am winning. So I'm liking this season. It's fun.
That's good. It's it's interesting. I didn't realize. I am still getting to know you, but when I read your bio, I didn't realize our kids are the exact same ages,
Gotcha.
with the same spacing apart. Lindsay did the exact same thing you did until our youngest was, and was a haul, just like what you're talking about. But I'm really enjoying this season as well, and so I 100% resonate with all of that. I think that's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Cool.
So tell us your ministry story. Like I just mentioned, I'm still getting to know you in some ways, but I definitely don't know your history and your background. You shared a little bit about us. Tell us how you have found yourself where you're at right now.
Yeah. So I grew up in a Christian home in Southern California. I could go into a longer version of that, but on a brief note, my mom and dad were saved in the Jesus movement.
Okay.
With Calvary Chapel. And my dad had come out of like drugs, hippie stuff. My mom had grown up Lutheran. They both got radically transformed by Jesus during the 70s, got saved, got married. And so that's the home that I grew up in. For the most part, I said yes to Jesus as a 3-year-old. Legit, like my mom would ask me when I was little, she has a high voice. She'd be like, Bethy, do you want to ask Jesus in your heart? And like as a little 2-year-old, I'd be like, no.
Tenacious.
Yeah, no. And then I vividly remember one day, I think I was like an older 3-year-old. She was like, Bethy, do you want to ask Jesus in your heart? And I was like, yes. Like I knew I wanted to. I vividly remember it. And just grew up in that home. Side note, though, the church I grew up in, I don't tell a lot of people this, but it became really fringy over the years because my parents didn't know a lot about what it meant to follow Jesus. So the pastor of this church that they were gathering in, it wasn't Calvary Chapel. It was like this little like Bible study that they were meeting in. It just became more and more like off over the years because they didn't know for themselves necessarily what they believed. So whatever the pastor said is what they followed. And there came a certain point where my mom actually had to like leave the church and my dad divorced her because of it. So It was pretty jacked up.
Wow.
I even wonder if there's part of like a core of me that really values the formation process because of that. Because I don't think that they had really been formed. They said yes to Jesus and then they just started being a part of this gathering. But what the leader said was what they, based everything on.
Wow.
So I grew up in a Christian home, but it wasn't necessarily like super healthy, right? But by the grace of God, it was when I was 8 years old that my parents divorced. But by the grace of God, we ended up in a good, healthy church. Because a lot of times when people go through something like that, they bail. Like they attach all of that to who Jesus is, to who God is, and they totally walk another way. So we ended up in a really healthy church. Kind of like walked out my teen years as a lot of people do. We moved from Southern California to Jackson Hole, Wyoming. And then when I was about 14, kind of started to pursue some things of the world, just trying to figure out who I was, and ended up at a youth event, Acquire the Fire, with my youth group,
Oh, I took youth to Acquire the Fire. Oh,
totally.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I was there with a group of friends that were like not interested in being there. Sort of like camp vibes, where you're there with the kids that are like in the back and like, this is lame.
Oh, yeah.
But a couple nights in, the message cut to my heart. I walked down, recommitted my life to Jesus, like in a very profound, transformative way. And it was like this moment where I was like, God, like, I don't know what you have for me or what that's going to look like, but like, I'm all in. Like, whatever it looks like, I want my yes to be for you. So that was a turning point. I started to lead worship in my youth group at church. Didn't really sing before, didn't really play guitar before. The Lord started pulling my heart. And I thought that I wanted to go to school to be a doctor, but the Lord totally pivoted me. Long story short, I ended up at Life Bible College. So back to Southern California. And then at the end of that, 4 years, graduated, credentials as a Foursquare pastor at 22. Boom.
Woo!
Ready.
That's
arrived.
how we used to do it. That's right.
You know
fully
it.
formed.
That's right.
Oh, fully arrived. And
that's so good.
So that's kind of what launched my ministry journey. There's a lot to that, of course, but yeah.
So you, and thank you for sharing, the vulnerability. And I love the self-awareness even of, I think that may be why, what you went through formation is so important. And we're definitely going to get to that. But you're coming out, as Brenton made the joke, but that's kind of the expectation. Okay, now you've graduated and you're licensed. Go get them, kid. So what did that look like for you then after that point?
Yeah, so I, during college, was a part of the Rock Church in Anaheim. And I was helping with youth worship there and ended up meeting Kelly Fellows, who had moved out from Colorado to plant a church out of the Rock. So he was kind of serving as the interim youth pastor before he planted. And so he invited me to be part of his church plant. So graduated and moved down to South Orange County with him and a whole crew. Like Bruce Primrose was a part of it, Jay and Susie Jenin.
Yep, know them.
This whole amazing crew of people. And was appointed as a worship pastor for that church plant. And was there for a few years until I was introduced to my husband, Ben, who was in Colorado. And then we dated long distance, got married, moved to Colorado at that point.
And so and then you were done with ministry, right? That was just.
I mean, you want me to tell you my whole life story? And then first off, this is long form. I don't know if we're going to cut any of this or not. We may keep it. I don't know. Well, no, but I mean, your story, and I mean, I think part of it, and maybe this is the better question. So, as you've progressed through ministry, how has your ministry journey shaped how you approach and maybe even define ministry right now? Yeah. Well, there's a couple things. So for one, I think in my teen years, when God really got a hold of my heart, the primary way that I started to express that was through worship. He used that as an avenue to pull me in and draw me in and help me to see myself as a minister and as a church leader. Serving on the team, leading the team, use that as a way to get me to life. I majored in Bible, minored in music. So I was on the worship track, graduated. My appointment was as a worship pastor. So the drawback of that, though, was I very narrowly defined who I was as a minister and what that was supposed to look like. So my identity was as a worship pastor.
Oh, okay.
So that's a huge part of my story. It's side note, it's interesting these days, a lot of people don't even know that that's a core part of who I was. And so I was talking to somebody recently, they're like, oh, do you play, they found out I played guitar, and they're like, I didn't know that. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is weird. It's all that people knew of me before. It's the only thing they knew, right? So there's that piece. Another part though would be if I'm writing in my bio, the things I've done, because of the journey and the different iterations, I've got to have a lot of different experiences. So when Ben and I got married, we were youth pastors together. We taught high school at a Christian high school together. Then in 2010, we moved to Sterling and we became lead pastors. But in the midst of that, I was filling holes, right, at the church when you're co-pastoring.
Yep.
So, 2 years leading the nursery ministry because it was needed. Creative arts director, doing comms, doing admin, just all the things. So because of that, though, got a wide variety of experience. Yeah. Developmental opportunities.
Which, now especially looking at your current role, it's really interesting to me. So you started and I'd love to maybe pull out here in just a second more on this, but your original identity, you saw it as I'm a worship pastor, and that's it, and that's what ministry is maybe, and yet as you've kind of gone along, it sounds like there's been maybe gradual, maybe in some seasons not so gradual, chipping away at that to where being an associate supervisor for let's just be honest, the largest district in Foursquare right now. Maybe not numbers wise, but when you think territory wise.
Yeah, geographically.
Yeah, it's not small. And so that doesn't just happen overnight, and all these different experiences playing into, bringing you to this space. What, maybe going back then to that original, the identity piece, because I think this is something that, leaders, period, especially in ministry, we put ourselves in our own boxes.
Totally.
And what was the process for you to work your way out of that?
Yeah. So, I mean, that's the $1 million question, Chad, which really is what has brought me into the season I'm in now. So I had some really amazing mentors in my life as, Ben and I stepped into our role in 2010 and serving our church, lead pastoring, all of that stuff. But we were part of the Gateway District, the historic Gateway District for Foursquare. Sam Rockwell is our district supervisor, and somebody that served with him, Jesse Cruikshank, was the director of leadership development. And she just started to invite Ben and me both to developmental opportunities, trainings, things like that. And there was something stirring in me around 2015, 2016, that was just like a hunger to grow, a hunger to learn. I don't really know where that came from. I mean, I guess from the Lord, just like, I was like voraciously reading, listening to tons of podcasts, just like I wanted to learn, I wanted to grow. At the same time, Jessie is like inviting me into opportunities. And one of the things she invited me to be a part of was this, it was a 24-week cohort called Unique, YOU, Unique. And it was like an identity and calling discernment process. And I said yes because I trusted her and she was a friend. And I was like, cool, yeah, I want to learn and grow. Yeah. And it was completely like disruptive in my life because like I thought I knew who I was. I thought I knew what my calling was. I was like, I know my identity. I know my calling. I'm mid-30s, have 3 kids, senior pastor, good to go. Totally blew up my world. Because I realized I had been defining myself, my identity, my calling by a role, by a hat I was wearing. And it was bigger than that. It was bigger than that. And that's where like that trailblazer comes in. Like I ended up coming away from that with a calling statement, trailblazing capacity. That's who I am, no matter what hat I'm wearing, no matter what role I'm in, no matter like the environment I'm in. That's true for me. And I started to see like, wow, like the core of who I am, the core of who God has made me to be, that's true whether I am sitting across the table from somebody, like having a cup of coffee. That's true whether I'm holding a microphone. That's true whether I'm holding a guitar. Like that's the me that I bring to all these spaces.
Yeah.
So it was like, it was focusing in that like, wow, like this is who I am regardless of role, but it was also expanding. It expanded my imagination for, whoa, like, God could use this in a lot of ways. Like, wow, like I wonder what God might want to do with this. And I didn't know what that was supposed to look like. I still don't, right? It's like, there's no limit to that.
Sure.
So it blew up a bunch of stuff and it like invited me into like this new terrain of what the Lord might want to do with my life. Yeah.
So how is that then, taking that, and you said that phrase a couple of times, a calling statement. And I feel like I know what that is. And I've heard it maybe framed or even labeled different things. Cause I went through a similar thing a couple of years ago and I can't remember what it was, like purpose statement or something like that. Yeah. Give us that calling statement of yours, but then also as you are encountering whatever it is that God is saying is next, how is that playing into as you approach ministry?
Yeah. So, for me, like the core of a calling statement is that this is something that's true of you, no matter what season of life you're in, no matter what hat you're wearing, no matter what role you're in, right? So mine is trailblazing capacity. The longer form of that would be that, Beth exists to trailblaze the capacity of people and organizations by pioneering pathways for optimum impact.
Wow. Okay.
So that's true of me, no matter what. Like it's been true of me when I was 18. It's true of me now. It'll be true of me in the future. So it gives you clarity. But then as you're discerning yeses and nos, it helps you with that as well. So you're not saying yes to opportunities out of some like external metrics of success or based on internal ideas of who you think you're supposed to be. It's not about climbing a ladder of some, and then, the old adage, and then you get to the end and realize it's leaning on the wrong wall,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But it's really like discerning with the Lord with each and every opportunity. Is this in alignment with who you've made me to be? Is it in alignment with the purpose that you have for my life? And it helps you to be obedient with your yeses and nos.
Yeah. Wow. That's really good. And actually, I've actually heard that illustration, and I don't think it hit me until you just spelled it out that way, of as you're walking, you're climbing, and you're taking the next step and realizing, one, it sounds like freedom, right? Because you're even free of what other people's expectations might be of you or what you're supposed to be doing or functioning in. And it's the obedience factor of, no, I know that I'm being moved in the right direction, right?
Right.
Yeah,
and it helps, like, that's why I say, like, I'm in this role in this season. It's not about this role. It's about being obedient to the Lord and making my best kingdom contribution in this season. And so whether I'm, quote unquote, throttle back in the season ahead to like a, lesser role, as somebody might view it, that's fine. It's about being obedient in this season with who God's made me to be. It's not about promotion or demotion. It's about what success looks like for my life and the season that I'm in.
Yeah. Well, that's especially important. There are some ministry assignments that, do go longer, and then there are some that are definitely temporary. And so that's just another level of freedom within that when God says, okay, we're going this direction now, you're able to walk it and not, it doesn't mean there's not some panic, but
Well, and like even stepping into the role I'm in now is terrifying. Like, oof, like
as it should be. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So, it's like, it gives you the courage to do hard things, whether the hard thing is stepping out into something you haven't done before, or maybe stepping back away from something that you're not supposed to be doing anymore. Courage can look a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it just needs to be in alignment with obedience to who the Lord's made you to be.
And the key there is you have to know that. You have to know that you know that.
Right.
So, you walk through that process. And maybe this is kind of one of the questions that we cut from the top, but I think it goes well here when it comes to resources. I know you said you walked through, the process is a program or it's an event unique. Are there other things when people are talking about identity and even if they've been in ministry for a bit, having, the self-awareness to go, maybe I don't have this all figured out? And what do you say to somebody, any leader that be walking through something like that?
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot of great tools and resources for like discerning calling and purpose. Like you mentioned, you went through one recently. 20 years ago in Foursquare was Focus Living, which is still a really good resource. You can still access it online. I could give you my whole like laundry list of ideas. What I'm saying all that before I say my actual answer that I would recommend is that it's not about a program. It's not about a silver bullet.
Okay.
It's about making sure that you've walked through a process, a developmental process of really discerning and articulating who you are, what God's calling you into. I think it happens over life multiple times. You circle back to this more and more. Usually you get more clarity as time goes on and you have maybe a longer lens of what the Lord has been doing with the story of your life, right?
Yeah.
So clarity becomes more and more clear as you walk the journey. But because this is such, I think, a vital hinge point in somebody's journey as they grow into who God's made them to be, it's something that we have gone big on in the Central District. And so we have something called the Foursquare Discovery Intensive that we're actually facilitating nationally and across a lot of districts for this very purpose. But for people that are emerging leaders before they launch out into their journey, for people that are existing, like I was, in the middle of my ministry journey, and wow, like I really needed to go through something like this.
Yeah.
And for somebody maybe who's like nearing the end of their, first third, second third, maybe the second part of their journey, preparing for a new season, succession, transition, you need to have this level of clarity as you move into the third of your life.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we've curated like a very Foursquare specific process actually for this purpose, because it is so vital in somebody being able to flourish in who God's made them to be.
Yeah. Is that something that people can access now?
Yeah, well, we have the next one is in November 5th through 8th, 2025, where it's going to be at Camp Hickory.
Okay.
We just had one in Boulder last year for Central District. Camp Hickory's this year. We're gonna do it every year, and just really create space for people to be able to engage in this if it would be helpful to them.
Yeah, and we'll grab the link for that.
Okay.
Throw it in the show notes for sure. Yeah.
One of the questions that just keeps coming to my mind is, like you said, that you went through this process in your 30s, and it, helped in shaping your identity. And I just keep thinking, how do we get this to people sooner?
Right.
Oh, that's good.
How do we get this to our young people? And even like, how do we get our, like, I don't know, at 18, I wasn't thinking that way. I wasn't thinking I need to like make sure my identity is fully forming, and how do we do that? And I have people in mind that I'm even thinking about as we're talking through.
Yeah.
That would be fantastic, but also, how do I get this in front of them sooner?
Yeah, well, I think one, as a leader, you need to have a value for it, where when you you're stewarding people, you see, wow, this is a core part of their formation that's needed, where it's not reactive, but it's, responsive for where they're at in their journey. So that's the first piece. You have to have a value for it. And then the second would be like the event that we're offering at Camp Hickory is for emerging, existing, and transitioning leaders. So the one we just did in Boulder this last year, we had a whole crew of young adults there, in their early 20s. And so I'm so pumped for them, because they're getting to do this early on rather than later have to deconstruct everything they think about themselves.
So Brenton, basically it starts with you. You have to bring them to these things.
It's me. Okay.
You're the problem. We established that earlier.
Yes, I will fix the van.
Before we started.
Fix the van.
Fix the van.
And there's a lot of great things that you can do, like for younger leaders. Even I took my daughter when she was 14 through a process like this. It was called Unique Students. So
and you did that, like you personally did that?
Yeah. So there's a lot of great resources. I'd be happy to give you the whole laundry list. But I think it's just at its core, you as a leader, as you're walking with people, have to see this as this vital part in the developmental process. Yeah. And I am 100%, 150% sold on this is so essential in somebody's journey for them to flourish in ministry and at the later stages of life. It is so core.
Well, and I'll go back to what you said, based on your own personal, familial experience of formation being such a big part of it. And I love how, even like you bring it up with your daughter, it doesn't have to be something that we, like you said, a program, process, that kind of a thing. It literally is just the intentionality of, and the as you go, with, because there are things I feel like I get in my own way when I try to add a lot of different resources to these things, when really there's a lot of just being with the leaders, especially younger leaders. And you're calling out the things that you're seeing that the Lord is placing on your heart, that you're trying to draw out and affirm their identity as well. That's so key. And I think, thank you for saying that. I think it's so good.
Yeah. And I would add to that, there's like this dailiness, there's like this organic nature of just walking with people, right? And it's helpful to have like a map for the journey. Like you're the guide for somebody. So that goes back to the idea of like trailblazing and stuff.
Yeah.
If I'm trying to take somebody on a journey, like there are some like mile markers that are helpful to know as you're walking with people. It doesn't have to become programmatic. It doesn't have to become like tight and stifling. But you as a guide, it's helpful to know, okay, like they need to be growing in this area. They need to be growing in this area. They need to be growing in this area. And like the framework that I use is growth pathway, discipleship, discovery, development, deployment. It's something that's repeated over and over throughout somebody's life, but each mile marker is actually needed for somebody to grow. So it's the lens I used for my daughter's discipleship journey. We did a 2-year intentional discipleship journey over her middle school years. It's what I use for pastors. It's what I use for my own life. But discipleship is just simply being formed into the image of Jesus, right?
Yeah.
Like growing in your Christ-likeness, growing in your character. It's like this inside-out formation. And that's vital. It's needed. But it doesn't just stop there. You don't ever graduate from that, but there's like these juncture points that are needed. So yes, you're a disciple. Yes, you're growing into the image of Jesus. Yes, in a daily way, you're putting your life on the altar and letting him burn up things that aren't of him, right? But then the next stage would be discovery. And that's that calling stuff that we've been talking about of, yes, you're a follower of Jesus, but what does that look like uniquely for your life, right? What does that uniquely look like for the life that you're living as a male, as a female, your age, where you're living, your ethnicity, the things that you're responsible for your life. Dallas Willard famously said, it's a little bit cheeky and it's a kind of conjecture, but he says, when you get to heaven someday, God's not going to ask you how much did your life look like Jesus, but how much did your life look like it would have looked if Jesus was living it? Oh,
yeah.
So if Jesus was stewarding your life, what would that look like? And you need to be able to discern that for your own life and journey. So it's super, super vital. And then development, the way that development is distinct from discipleship is I see development where discipleship is character formation, development is competency formation, and competency is learning things and putting them into practice, right? To be able to grow in that space, you need to be learning stuff, becoming more aware of certain things, and then applying them. That has to do with competency. And then deployment is being launched into opportunities, roles, assignments that fits your calling and your stage of development. And so this is always happening over and over again throughout your entire life. You're being discipled, you're discovering, you're developing, you're deploying. It's not a one and done. Yeah. So like that's the map that I use as I walk with people. So it's organic, it's not programmatic, but it is this kind of map that we're walking through together.
Well, and thank you for taking time to unpack that, because that was actually one of the things I was going to ask. What does the mile markers look like? Because that imagery in itself is so practical. But the way you've unpacked that, it's not, like you said, it fits a mold for one size fits all, but it can actually be adapted and tailored to whoever it is that you're walking through any kind of development, not just leadership development, but, the formation, the heart formation, the discipleship development process. That's really, really good. Thank you.
Yeah, and I just want to add real quick that to each of those things, there's like a menu of resources and stuff that's available. And where I think we get too programmatic is where we say, this is the one solution for each of these areas. Like, this is how you have to do discipleship. This is how you have to discover. Yeah. There's a lot of options available for that. So I think that's important to remember.
And something else that you actually wrote down, because I have used it myself, but I think it's important as you're walking with somebody. You said the phrase stewarding people, and that is so key in any kind of leadership development, any kind of personal development, or even just people that would be on your team. Because if you start seeing them as anything other than something that I'm to steward, then I think that's when we get sideways on things, or we start holding ourselves into higher esteem than we ought to. And a lot of the other things that can trip us up. That is so important. And I just want to say thank you for saying that phrase specifically, because if we could get that in any kind of interaction, man, I feel like that's a game changer.
Yeah, they don't belong to us, right?
Right.
So,
right. Well, and I don't. That's the other thing. I don't hold on to them or like
right.
tight fist. Like I often tell people, especially when we're sending leaders, and even if it's painful, like it's going to potentially set us back. That is our job. Like eventually we're supposed to get to the deployment, right? That's the whole point. Like Jesus was sending his disciples, right? We're supposed to do that. And I think if you forget that there's that fourth D that you got to get to, whatever that looks like, and it might be they're outside of now your covering.
Right.
Yeah.
Or being deployed into an assignment in the community, and you thought they were going to be a pastor at your church. You're like, maybe that's not what success looks like for them. You know, someday I'm going to deploy my daughter. And there will be joy and grief attached to that.
That's right.
That's what winning looks like. So.
And panic. There will be some panic with that. Let's be honest.
I'm not ready for that right now.
I am definitely not ready for that. No, we're entering into the, getting the license stage and that type of thing. I'm just thinking, wait, driving?
Yep.
I know.
What?
Lucy keeps asking for a horse instead of a car. I'm like, that's more expensive.
You know what, though?
It's probably, I don't know if
I
it's
might
safer
feel better about it. I don't know. Might be something to explore.
Yeah. More animals to take care of.
That is true. Kind of sticking within as far as the formation and development and learning. One of the questions I had actually when it comes to, I preface this with, I think that as leaders, we're supposed to constantly be learning, right? Supposed to be growing ourselves, not just growing others. I'm curious, what are some of the things that as you're walking with people, especially through formation and the road, markers, as you mentioned, that type of a thing. What are some of the things that you've learned about yourself while you're investing in other leaders?
Yeah. So being a trailblazer, have a lot of passion. I can see 5, 10, 15 years down the road. I can see, oh man, I can tell you what's best for people, right? Like, let me tell you what you should be doing with your life, right?
Right.
In a cheeky way. I'm all about people discovering, and then I'm like, yeah, this is what you should be doing. But when you have a passion to see people like grow into everything God's made them to be, and you have these I see in you conversations, and you can prophetically imagine what the Lord might want to do with somebody's life. It's hard when you don't see immediate results, right? When you keep encountering the same issues or blind spots, that's frustrating. I'm wired more as an apostolically than as a shepherd. Imagine that, right? So it's hard to kind of sit in the muck and the slow long game, but the short answer to your question is that it's a long game, right? I think it takes that vision for somebody's life, the long-term vision, to give you that passion to keep going and to keep committing to that. But it's not instantaneous. It's going to take a long time. Man, I could tell you stories of just to protect them. I won't go into detail, but just,
we've got time if you'd like to air it all out. Or
I'll change the names to protect the innocent.
Okay,
but
that's
just,
fine.
People in your church where you're you could see stuff. Two scenarios. One where you can see stuff in, and it has taken, we've been in our church for 14 years. So I'm seeing the fulfillment of things that I saw 10 years ago now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's taken a long time, way longer than I would have hoped for. Along with that, there's people that I saw so much stuff in and they bailed. And that's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Because I actually really there's a call of God on their lives, and they, for whatever reason, got sidetracked, that's heartbreaking. And that's where that tenderhearted side is this sucks.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think you need to know where your responsibility begins and ends, So yes, we're stewards. We're stewards of people that God has entrusted to us, and there's a responsibility attached to that. But you can't force people to pursue whatever it is you think that they should be pursuing.
Yeah.
You have to be open-handed and let people walk the journey. I mean, that's what Jesus does with us. Mm-hmm. So
how does that, this is kind of an aside to that, because you touched on a pain point of mine, and a lot of this, have a lot of the same passions for investing in leaders and that kind of thing. And there's some you're just like, you see it for them. Like they will outshine me for sure, kind of a thing. And they should. And like you said, they walk away or that's what it is. And then there's that pain point. How have you learned to navigate that when those type of things do take place?
Well, usually I get super frustrated and heartbroken and mad. And then I sit in my hot tub with my husband and talk about how lame it is. But yeah, I just want to be real and be like, you gotta talk it out. Like there's grief attached to that. And I mean, we all know you can't just stuff that. So you gotta be real. Like this sucks. And like, again, know where your responsibility begins and ends. So like, people have to walk their own journey. Yeah. Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, a good leader of ours in our life said, you have to pastor the people that you're actually the pastor for. So like, there's some people like you're not their pastor. Like as much as you wish you could be, like they're not being pastored by you. So let them do their thing. You have to pastor the people that are there,
Well, and that ties back to the identity piece that you were talking about. Not that your identity is because I am their pastor, but that is an important thing, because I will spin my wheels going all out for somebody, and they only see me as somebody just to prop them up, not really actually pastoring, shepherding them. And that's so important. So I 100% agree with that.
Yeah. And I would just, as you were saying that, I think knowing what like leadership looks like for you, like for me, it's taking somebody on a journey. I want after a year or two, a couple years for somebody to have grown, in their walk with Jesus. And so for me, like that's how I would define pastoring. It's not just staying in one place for a long period of time. It's actually like moving in a direction together, and helping guide people along that. Everybody's going to move at different paces, but yeah.
What would be kind of on that same vein? When you're talking about walking with others, and specifically maybe even leader development, what are some of the things that you have learned? These are the things I need to avoid, or these are the potential roadblocks or pitfalls that as we're walking through. I mean, I know there's the humanity side of things, right? Sure. But when it comes to maybe from your perspective as the person walking with, or maybe your perspective of the person that you are walking with, what are some of those things that really we should be aware of?
Yeah. I think, in the same way that you need to know who you are as a person and as a leader and what your assignment is, you need to know that for your church too. So I think sometimes we haven't really done a lot of work to define like what does discipleship look like for us, and like where we're actually trying to take people. We're just kind of like loosey-goosey with it. And there's something to be said for space and grace for each type of person, but I think there needs to be intentionality and strategy.
Yeah.
So like at our church, I had said earlier, we got here in 2010 and to be lead pastors. Our church at this point is 96 years old.
Oh, yes.
97, started in 1928. So,
nice.
So historic church in a very rural community, got here, and we like did not make a lot of changes for a good 3-4 years. Like really, like we couldn't. It would have been
wisdom.
Dumb.
That's wisdom. Yeah.
I mean, you burn any bridges in a small town and like everybody's related to somebody, like just slow and steady, right?
Yeah.
So all that's to say we were about 4 or 5 years in, and we realized we had a problem. And the problem was like people were saying yes to Jesus on Sunday mornings, and our only answer for them was come back next Sunday. Like legitimately, like we didn't have like processes for helping people to grow. We had just kind of inherited a Sunday morning, system. And so we started out, we were like, this is a problem. Like it is our responsibility to address this. We have to address this. We have to have a better answer for people than just, yeah, you said yes to Jesus, come back next Sunday. So we really started to pray and discern from the Lord, like, what does that look like for us? What does that look like uniquely for our context, for the culture of our church? And like two things, we started to talk to a lot of different people that we trusted, like leaders that were a few years ahead of us, and asking them what they had done to solve it. So it's important to have people in your life that you can go to for that type of resourcing. And we sought the Lord. We needed to hear from him. And so we ended up addressing it in a very specific way for our church. But we knew that that was what the Lord had led us to. And we cut everything else. We cut every other program at our church. And we were like, 3 big rocks. This is who we are here. And so if you're a part of who we are here, this is how you're going to engage in the life of our church family. We cut women's ministry. We cut men's ministry. Like we cut everything. We cut everything.
Wow.
And we were like, because we needed to be super clear that this is our pathway. Like, this is how we do this together.
Yeah.
So we had our Sunday morning gatherings. We call our Inspire Hub. We had our equipping classes on Sunday nights. That's where we chose to do it. And then we had our connect groups that meet in people's homes. That was it. Like, women wanted to like grow. Oh yeah, come to a connect group, come to an equipping class. Like, but that was what we did. And I think that was key because we knew what God was calling us to do with the people that he was entrusting to us. So we had a plan, but we were being obedient to the Lord. And we weren't just trying to replicate something we saw somewhere else to solve the problem.
I like that because oftentimes you hear one or the other, right? So just ask the Lord and do it, or just strategize and then see if, that works, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And, having pastored in similar context of smaller town, inheriting an established church,
Right.
you do have to move slow. And to hear you say you cut, women's and men's ministry, I can hear some of the gasps right now, but going back to kind of what you said from the very beginning, when you hear the Lord and you know that this is what we're called to be doing in this season right now,
Mm-hmm.
It makes a lot of those tough decisions easier. Doesn't mean people are going to swallow the medicine as easy,
Right.
but at the same time, it's just really, really interesting to me how, like you said, it's okay. I lead this way. I think it's more not interesting in that fact, but it's more, we can actually do these things with some strategy as well. Because oftentimes you hear, you insert strategy or planning something and they go, well, where's the Holy Spirit in that?
Right.
And oftentimes I have to go, well, it takes me more trust to actually plan it and then stick to it because I heard the Lord say it than it does,
True. Yeah. When people start, being late adopters, let's say that. But I'll tell you, it's worked. And I'm not saying it's worked so that somebody copies it. Just we heard from the Lord. We knew what he was calling us to. And I mean, we were careful with how we rolled it out. We were kind and careful. But it has worked. People have grown and are growing like crazy. Like, it's incredible.
So where's the website to what you guys did? I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Well, I say that in jest, but you never know. That may be actually the confirmation somebody listening to might go, I've kind of had this same thought for a while. And to hear a story of success that it did work doesn't mean that it was clean all the way around. I'm sure you had some bumps within that and some personalities that you had to walk through, right?
Yeah.
But it is effective, I think is the word. I try to get away from the word successful because I don't even really know. I think everybody can define success, especially in ministry, a lot differently. And so what is the effectiveness of going back to the mission and vision and that map that God has given us? Yeah,
I mean, like you need to, I think, know where where the end goal is, and then really discern what the pathway is that the Lord's leading you to take to get there. But my point in both of those is you should have discernment about where you're going, and you should have an articulated pathway. That's leadership.
That's right.
However you come about it, whether you do it alone in a room and that's your style of leadership, or whether you do it with a group of people and you co-create it together, like, it's all good. but you need to know where the Lord's leading you, and you need to have a path to get there.
Yeah,
that's leadership. Good. Yeah.
That's really good. By the way, it sounds like you know Gary Donahue as well, because the co-creation thing is something that we have taken directly from him. And
okay,
yeah. So
I first learned it from Jessie Cruikshank.
Okay,
and
so he stole it from her.
No, it's a developmental church terminology, which is legit. It's awesome. I was in a cohort with Tammy Donahue probably in 2018. And she set it up in the 3 ways of iconic, L, leader, collaborative, and then co-creative, and talked about actually how to use it in those 3 spaces, even though, you know, collaborative leadership can have a negative connotation because of where it came from. But you actually, I would say, need to use those 3 spaces strategically based on the health of your church. So if you have a very unhealthy church and team, you don't want to do co-creative leadership because you're going to create something really bad.
That's right.
You need to be an iconic L leader if your church is unhealthy. Like, blow it up, get it done. This is where we're going. Let's go. It depends on where you're at as a church. So that's good.
I don't know if we can use any of that, but that was, because there was no context for it. But anyway.
Well, since you're cutting, AJ, we also, we just turned 90. The church hit their 90-year anniversary this year, and we're doing a lot of the same thing. And I find myself in spaces of where I would love to be doing things where it's not healthy. I'm going, okay, this is where we're going. And that's not my style of leadership, but it's the type I need to do right now to get to where we're moving into a place that's healthy.
Exactly.
And then the co side of that is like, I brought in a coach to help coach me through to get to a place that's healthy. And
that's good. That's smart.
I think we can use all of this because we're also in the 90s. I think we're coming up on 94 this year.
Cool.
We celebrated 90 my first year. So 94. But it was not necessarily an established church because it was, but there was a lot of hurt and a lot of hard things that they had to walk through here. And so I was also in a state when I came in, I could not... I did not have as much co-creation that could take place because a lot of it was just getting people healed or even just, helping to establish where are we even at right now and where do we think God is leading us in the midst of all of this. And so I think it's really good to be able to assess where you're at when it comes to, moving forward within that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you'll have a natural style of leadership, and then also you need to switch out the approach based on what you're doing. So yeah, even
it's
if
seasons.
It feels a little awkward. Yeah,
that's good. All right, well, Beth, this has been great. We'll get you out on this question here. So you've got some miles behind you now, some experience, especially within not just the local context, but also working with church, big C. As you're looking ahead, especially looking back at what you have learned, what is encouraging to you, but also what is inspiring you as we move forward to where it is that God is leading us?
Yeah, I think what's encouraging to me is that we are like a small part of like a much greater story. A lot of times we look at like the scope of our leadership and feel like this immense weight of responsibility. But we're just in a good way, a blip on the radar of what God's doing, his sovereignty. And I think there's so much that we can learn from those who have gone before us, even about how to move forward into the future. Right. So through seminary, I have become super fascinated by like historical theology and like the stories of the church and leaders who've gone before us. I think we can learn a lot of good things about what to do, what not to do, right? Like every issue that we're facing in the church today is attached to some historical heresy, right? That's real. So knowing that is like, oh, that's just this thing being repeated from the past. It removes like the angst from it a little bit.
That's really interesting. Yeah, that's good.
It's super interesting.
Yeah.
And so, but the same is true for like things that have worked in the past, what winning has looked like in the past. Like one particular story that I have just become like fascinated by, I a couple years ago learned this story in my historical theology class, is the story of George Whitefield and John Wesley. They were part of the Great Awakening in England in the 1700s. And what's interesting about these two leaders is, they were friends. They were in college together. They were colleagues, but, George Whitefield was famous for his preaching. He popularized this idea of like mass evangelism. As you think about like these big, Billy Graham crusades and all of that, like George Whitefield was like one of the OG like preachers who did that. He had this flair for the dramatic. He was an actor turned evangelist. His sermons were like theatrical. They were fiery. The stories of his sermons is like large crowds would be like screaming and crying. People would be fainting. I mean, it was like the Pentecostal movement, but in the 1700s, right?
Sounds like somebody else we know. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. Right. So like, it was like super interesting, like just how these things have repeated over history. So he's known for his powerful preaching. He preached over 18,000 sermons in his lifetime. 10 million people heard his messages. So he's like this iconic evangelistic, fiery preacher that God used powerfully for people to come to the Lord during the 1700s. So along with him, you have his friend John Wesley, who was also known as a fiery preacher. But John Wesley believed at his core that conversion was just the starting point for a relationship with God. So he had strong ties to like Eastern Orthodoxy, theosis, this idea that you're walking this journey of being in union with God. So because of that, for him, it wasn't just about the evangelistic message, but it was about walking with people into formation. So John Wesley didn't just preach, but he organized the movement and brought it under like systematic management, which is where you get this idea of Methodism, is he had this very specific method that he used.
Okay.
So Whitefield hoped that those who had been like awakened would just follow through on their own initiative, that he would just kind of like leave it to the Holy Spirit to work in their lives.
Yeah.
But John Wesley didn't want to leave anything to chance. So he made sure that those who were serious about leading this new life, that they would be channeled into like discipleship processes. So I'm going to nerd out a little bit because this is super interesting. So he had this structure. So this was John Wesley's structure. So he had his Sunday morning worship gatherings. And then he had three things called societies, classes, and bands. So societies were a grouping of around 50 people who came together to learn. So it was like a Sunday school class, a large group Sunday school class where they would learn content. It was like a cognitive experience. So then that was the society, but then you would have classes, and classes, it was just like a term for how they were grouped, was about 10 to 15 or 10 to 12 people, men and women together. And it was more behavioral an approach where they would have accountability questions and talk and pray. How are you doing with this in your life and such? So he actually required that people were a part of a society and a class in order to be part of Methodism, like to take communion. Like this was a core part of what he required. And then he also had bands, which were about 5 to 6 people, and these weren't required, but it was same gender, married or single, and they would get like down into like the weeds of what they were walking through, almost like a celebrate recovery kind of a thing.
Oh,
like
okay.
Hurts, habits, and hangups. So like there's nothing new under the sun. Like it's been done before, right? Yeah. So this was his process. This was his system. And I say all this to say, later in life, Whitefield was talking to a friend, and he was looking back at all the evangelistic work he had done as this fiery powerhouse preacher. And he was reflecting on the work that Wesley had done with his discipleship processes. And Whitefield said this. He said, "My brother Wesley acted wisely. The souls that were awakened under his ministry, he joined in class in these groups and thus preserved the fruits of his labor." And then he said this, "This I neglected, and my people are a rope of sand." So my people are a rope of sand. So he basically was like, all the preaching I did, 18,000 messages, 10 million people, in practical, like measurable terms, there was nothing to show for it.
Yeah.
Like I would push back and say, I'm sure there was a lot to show for it in terms of what the Holy Spirit did. But
sure.
So when I think about this, I think about, that's the stream. Wesleyanism is the stream that Foursquare has come out of. You see the value for that in Amy's life. I would see she is a Whitefield Wesley combination, and I would say that that's the secret sauce of Foursquare, honestly, really? If we do both of those well.
Yeah.
Where you have these like Holy Spirit inspired transformational encounters, and helping people to grow. You see that with what Amy did. She started Angela's Temple in 1923 and Life Bible College the same year, 1923, hand in hand. It's a dovetail approach. I think that's the crux of what we need to be leaning into, not one or the other, not just like a bunch of teaching and classes, and not just a gathering with sermons, both.
Yeah.
We need both.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's good.
Yeah.
Thank you for nerding out for us. That's good.
I think it's fascinating.
We don't use nerd as a derogatory thing at all here.
Neither do
I'm self-proclaimed. But yeah, when you think, I just love how you said it, there's nothing new. And when we keep trying to reinvent it, it really is as simple as it sounds. You know what I mean? It can just be, it's not forsaking one or the other. And I think that's great. I think it's great. It's very practical, and and it can be very simply personal to your context and to whatever it is that you're looking and walking through with your own ministries.
Yeah, exactly. It's just, hearing from the Lord and being intentional about where you're leading people. So
that's good. That's good. Well, Beth, this has been really, really good. For sure, a trailblazer. Very tenacious, yet very tenderhearted.
Tenacious B.
That's right.
Tenacious Beth. Yeah.
I also just realized that you did the classic, the first letter is the same for all three, which, listen, the alliteration, I like to believe that alliteration makes God's heart smile whenever we can have our points all have the same first letter. So,
look at that. That's how we make God happy.
Not only have you made a good episode, you have made the Lord smile today.
Oh, I'm so glad. Win-win.
Yes. But you've also made him smile for real reasons. And so we want to say thank you for being a part of this. Thank you for sharing this. I do think your experiences and even some of the stuff that you have walked through will help others that are listening to this. And so we want to thank you for your time. This has been great.
Yep.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks again for listening to the podcast. If you'd like to connect further with our guest, we've made ways to do so available in the episode show notes. If you'd like to connect with us further, support the podcast, or sign up for show updates, just go to withouthatingit.com to get started. And don't forget to subscribe to Ministry Without Hating It wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss our future episode releases. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you next time.